The United States boasts a massive stash of gold, cementing the dollar's dominance. Now, the BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, wants to challenge the dollar's rule. They aim to create a currency backed by their own gold reserves. But does BRICS have enough precious metal to pull it off? Or will America's gold supremacy prevail? Get ready as we explore the origins of BRICS, compare their gold reserves, assess their growth, and weigh the problems they face. Let's pit the U.S. gold stockpile against the BRICS nations and see who comes out on top in this high-stakes duel. But before we begin, we would like you guys to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and hit that notification bell icon so that you don't miss out on any amazing and entertaining content. The creation of BRICS. First, a quick history lesson. The BRICS alliance has its roots in 2001, when an economist named Jim O'Neill identified the high growth rates of Brazil, Russia, India, and China. He believed these emerging markets were rising stars whose economic progress deserved attention. Now, fast forward to 2009, and we find ourselves in the midst of a global financial crisis. The BRIC countries decided to have their first official summit in Russia. You see, many developing nations felt that the crisis, which started in the U.S., showed just how shaky the global financial system could be. They questioned why a problem in the U.S. should mess up their economies. This discontent with the U.S. dollar's dominance planted the seeds for a formal alliance among these emerging economic giants. In 2010, South Africa hopped on board, and that's how we got BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. These 5 nations were not only growing economically, but were also joining forces to create something quite powerful. Now here's the big question. Why would they challenge the mighty US dollar, especially when it's doing so well? Well, that's not an easy one to answer. To get it, we need to take a little detour back to the years after World War II. In 1944, something called the Bretton Woods Agreement was signed by 44 countries. This agreement essentially declared the US dollar as the world's go-to currency. Why? Well, the US was the biggest superpower left standing after the war, so it was the obvious choice. Then, in 1945, President Franklin Roosevelt had a secret meeting during the war. Now, though we don't have much info on what happened, we do know that he promised the King of Saudi Arabia protection in exchange for exclusive rights for the US to develop Saudi Arabia's oil. This deal gave birth to the petrodollar, and it handed the US 3 massive advantages. First, it made international trade more stable since everyone needed a trusted currency. Second, it turned the US into a superpower for investments in things like treasury bonds, real estate, and stocks. So, investing in the US gave hefty profits compared to anywhere else. And third, it linked energy and dollars, boosting the power of the US and the Western world. Now here's the real reason that propelled these nations to form their own alliance. We're taught that printing excessive money leads to inflation, which is generally true. But if you happen to be the world's reserve currency, it's a different story. Imagine having a special button that, when pressed, allows you to export your dollars, magically mitigating inflation. Now, this unique privilege can be a double-edged sword. If a country is reckless with its money printing or faces a recession, it can have profound global repercussions. That's a key part of why, when you look at the world today, you'll notice inflation on the rise in places like the UK, Italy, and Germany. In fact, inflation rates in various parts of the world have hit double digits, while in the United States, inflation is generally trending lower. Now, in theory, if the US decides to print more money to fix its own domestic issues, it could inadvertently create a spending problem. So, the US tries to solve other countries' issues with its money before its own. Why? Well, it strengthens foreign relations, builds alliances, serves global interests, and keeps inflation in check. But a big part of this is about creating demand for and reliance on the US dollar. Now, those 3 superpowers, trade stability, investment strength, and the ability to trade dollars for energy, give the US a lot of control over other countries. And that's why some nations have joined forces to create their own alliance, and maybe even their own currency. So, if a country needs to borrow money, where does it go? Well, printing your own money isn't smart. It causes inflation and chaos. Instead, countries turn to institutions like the World Bank or the IMF. These organizations are like the world's piggy banks. Developing nations can get loans for things like building infrastructure at fair interest rates, as long as they play by the rules. But not everyone thinks this is fair. Take the BRICS countries, for example. They have only about 14 to 15% of the voting power in the IMF. Plus, a lot of the world's foreign exchange reserves are in US dollars, about 58%, mostly held by central banks. Now, what if you heavily rely on US dollars and someone decides to freeze your reserves or limit trade? Well, we've seen that such tactics don't work well against a superpower. But if you're not as mighty and can't produce everything you need, the solution is to create your own bank, just like the BRICS nations did. They set up the NDB, or New Development Bank, in 2014, kind of like their version of the IMF. Since then, this bank has approved over $30 billion in loans for development and infrastructure projects. But there's a catch. A big part of NDB's funds are in US dollars. That's why these nations are thinking about making their own currency, possibly backed by gold, to rely less on the US dollar. This could shake up the global financial system and change the balance of economic power. But some BRICS nations feel that these advantages unfairly benefit the US at their expense. This dollar dependence has fueled de-dollarization efforts by BRICS for over a decade now. But does BRICS have the capacity to truly challenge the dollar's dominance? Well, one way to assess this is by comparing gold reserves. The US holds the largest amount of gold of any single country by a massive margin. As of 2023, America's official gold reserves stand at 8,133 metric tons. That's nearly as much as the next 3 highest countries put together. Now let's do a quick rundown of BRICS. Among individual member countries, no one even comes close to the US. In fact, the original BRICS combined have only 5,495 tons of gold in 2023. So the US, with its stockpile of 8,133 tons, held around 50% more gold than the total combined amount of all the BRICS countries. This astonishing gap makes it abundantly clear that BRICS does not have enough gold reserves to back a currency to rival the dollar. The US gold dominance is simply too much for BRICS to overcome. Faced with this huge gap, BRICS has tried to expand its ranks over the years. In 2022, they incorporated 6 new member countries. Yet even with these additions, BRICS now has around 6,600 tons of combined gold reserves. They still lag about 1,500 tons behind the United States. So the bottom line is that even after expansion and bringing in new gold reserves, the BRICS is nowhere close to challenging America's supremacy in gold holdings. This hard data makes it evident that efforts to back a BRICS currency with gold are very unlikely to shake the dollar's dominance. America's gold advantage is just too commanding. Limitations of BRICS. Looking deeper, there are also inherent limitations within BRICS that undermine coordinated efforts against the dollar. Critics argue that BRICS was founded with optimism and camaraderie, but then it lacks unity and direction in its agenda today. The member states have highly divergent goals and are often unable to reach consensus on major issues. For example, India and Brazil still want close ties with the US and are cautious about moving away from the dollar. They view BRICS more as a platform for negotiation rather than opposition. But China, Russia, and South Africa favor more aggressive de-dollarization. These internal contradictions have stalled the alliance from presenting a united front to challenge dollar supremacy. Experts also highlight how some BRICS members have turned autocratic. They advocate for democracy and human rights to be essential criteria for BRICS membership, but this is far from reality today. Overall, the internal discord and disillusionment within the alliance's purpose has diluted its strength substantially. Using BRICS to displace the dollar seems like an unlikely prospect. potential impact of de-dollarization. Now, most experts agree that given the vast gold reserves gap and internal rifts, the chances of BRICS succeeding in creating a gold-backed currency are slim.
New members of BRICS are far away from having anything that can rival the dollar's dominance. A unified BRICS currency, Russia, India, China, Brazil getting together and sharing currency, that's not going to happen.
So in closing, the prospect of BRICS toppling the dollar's supremacy through a gold-backed currency seems far-fetched presently. The U.S. possesses gold reserves several times higher than BRICS combined, even after its expansion. Furthermore, BRICS itself lacks cohesion in its agenda. Moving forward, the alliance is likely to prioritize gradual reforms in global finance, rather than attempting to unseat the dollar outright. Much would need to change for de-dollarization to gain momentum. But one thing remains clear. When it comes to gold, America still reigns supreme by a large margin. As we wrap up this financial face-off between the United States and the BRICS alliance, we hope that you've gained valuable insights into the world of gold reserves and global economic power plays. What are your thoughts on the future of gold-backed currencies and their potential on the global stage? Do you believe BRICS can really challenge the dollar's supremacy? Or perhaps you have other burning questions or ideas to share. In that case, leave your comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.